It is now time for the AEW Dynamite review here on the MrWarrenHayes Show. Hello, I'm Warren. Welcome. Happy Thursday, everyone. Hope you're having a lovely week so far. I hope your week is going your way. I really do, because mine is having a pretty good week. And on top of that, I maybe not on top, but throughout everything, good week, nice things happening so far. Things are kind of under control. On top of that, we got a pretty good Dynamite. In addition to Dynamite, that I can say with confidence and aplomb that it was good and I enjoyed myself, which is a little, uneven sometimes, let's put it that way. But hey, before we get into all of that, just want to say hello and remind you to leave a like on this video if you're watching on youtube.com/MrWarrenHayes, or if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast application, well, 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and 5-star ratings on Spotify go a long way to help promote and get the word out there. So I appreciate any help you're willing to give. Thank you very much in advance. But as far as this Dynamite goes, right? Let's start with the usual stuff, right? It's the Dynamite. Well, for clarity's sake, we're talking about the February 5th edition, 2025, of the AEW Dynamite that took place in College Park, Georgia, which I guess is not quite Atlanta. I'm not quite up on my geography, but the location is specified as being College Park. I know it's better to say Atlanta. It's like when you go to, if you're holding a show in Hoffman Estates, you're still tempted to say, oh, we're in Chicago, even though you're in Hoffman Estates. You know what I'm saying? It's like when you have a show in Montreal and you say you're from Laval. You have a show in Laval, but you say, hey, Montreal. Laval is not Montreal. Anyway, going off on a completely useless tangent here, but also part of the MrWarrenHayes Show brand. The college arena at the Gateway Center. I'll get it right. The Gateway Center at College Park was the venue that hosted. 2,718 tickets were distributed. They had, this is the final count. It's one of these occasions where I start the review and WrestleTix actually came in rushing with their final count. So, this is the number that we're going to go with. And what's interesting is that in the update that WrestleTix gave yesterday, they had the setup for 2,534 tickets. So we busted through that setup. This is, good news. We're not going to sit here and pretend like this marks the big turnaround in live attendance for Dynamites. Like we're not going to be stupid on that front, But still, this is good news that it was able to almost get its way up to 3,000. I still can't believe this is where we're at, where we're like, oh, good crowd, almost made it to 3,000. This is where we're at with AEW in 2025. But look, it is nonetheless a good mark here and something maybe to keep an eye on. If this becomes a trend, well, it's a positive one if this becomes a trend. And I think AEW could use some positive trends when it comes to its consumer-facing KPIs. Great crowd. Just a great crowd, right? It really, truly was a great crowd that they had last night. I think it also helped the show. I think it helped the talent as well. I think everyone was into it last night. I felt like everyone was giving it effort. I think everything pretty much overall clicked. And the audience was super into it too, like I said. So that kind of stuff happens. There's some stuff that they weren't into. We'll get to that in time. But yeah, like I was saying, I thought this was a good show. Started off with, let's get into it. Let's just get right into the business aspect of things. We had Renee Paquette starting off the show with Switchblade Jay White, which is, of course, the best way to start a show. Starting it off with some Jay White. I don't have any issues with that. I'm actually for that. we'll talk about it in a second. I'm getting ahead of myself. Like, there's a lot of really good things I want to talk about. I might be getting ahead of myself here, so I just want to rein it back just a little bit. Basically, they're outside, and he's saying that his relationship with Cope is being built real time, like right before our eyes, kind of thing. They don't have a history together, so it's being built there. References that, you know, he's had some history with FTR and isn't always great, and this is who I have to depend on, right? But because seeing that they have a common enemy, well, he doesn't really have an issue with everyone sort of looking out for each other, which makes it even stranger. I understand what they're doing. They're establishing the logic behind this, right? But it's a little strange considering that a little later on in the evening, Jay White's boys returned to the show. So he's still acting here as if he's still all alone now. Could he have just been, he didn't want to mention anything because, you know, in kayfabe, he wanted the Guns to fully surprise the Hurt Business. Look, it just doesn't make sense if he's going here saying, well, the only people that I can depend on are one guy I've never met, I don't have a history with, and two other guys that I do have history with, but that I don't really trust or like outside. So I'm like, in retrospect, it's a weird promo. But I also understand that they wanted to keep the Guns return a secret or a surprise for the live audience. So, you know, it's like, it's a weird one. It's just a strange one. Anyway, as he's talking, the Death Riders show up to take him out. But as they show up, Rated FTR show up in the back, and then everyone goes at it. Marina Shafir just runs in and scoops Renee Paquette away. She just scoops her up. She just runs to her and just like scoops her up. She like puts her on her shoulder. You know, she's like fucking, Shrek with Fiona, right? Just go, whoop, just lifts her up and just carries her off to where we don't know. I'm like, oh, are we doing a kidnapping angle? No, Renee did the rest of her stuff for the rest of I guess it was just to get her out of the way, keep her out of harm's way. Would Moxley have told Marina, you got to get my wife out of here so she doesn't get hurt because she's not involved in this? Maybe. But, you know, the important thing to remember is that Marina Shafir scooped up Renee Paquette, carried her off screen as the guys beat themselves up all the way to the ring. Good beat down. I like that. Look, I like these angles, you know, in a universe of overly complicated storyline cinema. I like myself a good beatdown angle, especially when there's multiple people involved, when the chaos can happen. And there's chaos here. Cameras were having a hard time keeping up. Between you and I, AEW cameras have a lot of trouble keeping up regardless. But you know, they're all paired off. They're doing their things. They're punching each other. And then eventually, Jay White gets Moxley in the ring. He's setting him up for a Blade Runner after giving a Blade Runner to Yuta, if my memory serves me right. But Pac runs in out of nowhere to save Mox, and then the heels get the upper hand. They start destroying the baby faces. Mox and Claudio start stomping, you know, Jay White. So Copeland gets on the mic, and he points out that the crowd is chanting his name. Now, the crowd had been chanting his name before he pointed out that they had been chanting his name. They had stopped chanting his name, and then he said, "You hear that, Mox? This crowd is chanting my name." And then they start going, "Cope, Cope, Cope" again, because you know, they're part of the show. But then, you know, so then he tells Mox, what about, you know, I challenged you for a match at Revolution. You haven't answered yet. And Mox tells him something to the effect of, you are nothing and you deserve nothing and you will get nothing, which was a tremendous line. And I support it. I support Jon Moxley dodging Adam Copeland because it's not a match I want at the very least. So I'm supportive of Mox in this circumstance. But Jay White gets on the microphone. And here's the thing. Like, Jay White gets on the microphone and he's irate, to say the least. And he's flat out telling Mox, he says, Mox, hey, you listen to me. I'm going to make you an offer. You and Claudio versus me and Cope in Australia in a Melbourne street fight. So no DQ. And he's fired up and he's into it. And he's pissed off and there's energy and there's vitriol. And I can't help but take a step back listening to that little promo segment and listen to these two guys, Cope on one side and White on the other, and think to myself, one guy got me excited for a match and the other still hasn't successfully done that. And that's the nature of a great promo. That's what makes Jay White really special. It's one, I know he is, despite the fact that he's messing around in the world championship environment, he's still considered a mid-card guy. But this guy, throughout his entire AEW run, and you can even go back to New Japan, but particularly here in his AEW run, most promos that he cuts about matches get you invested. He gets you into it. He sells you a ticket. You're like, okay, now I'm into it. And that was the case again last night. Just a simple but emotional, a charged promo filled with anger and hate and wanting to get revenge. Whereas Cope is just like, buddy, I told you, last week I challenged you. What do you say, Mox? You're like, come on, man. Come on. Like a complete dichotomy. One match I'm excited for. The other one I'm still like, I still hope it doesn't happen. Yeah, you haven't given me a reason for me to get excited about Cope versus Mox yet. So, look, I enjoyed the segment overall. I'm being nitpicky here, but I enjoyed the segment overall. Just a couple of observations I'm throwing in here. I enjoyed it. I thought that was fun. We get a little update, a little package showing Buddy Matthews challenging Kazuchika Okada to a Continental Championship match at Collision. That's going to be happening at the Grand Slam, Australian Grand Slam, the Aussie Grand Slam, slamming all the Grand Aussies. That's what we're doing here. Then we start leading into our first match of the night. Don Callis comes out, and he's there to introduce Will Ospreay's mystery opponent, right? Because as you recall, Will Ospreay was supposed to fight a mystery opponent. And it turns out, look, there was lots of speculation going on. A lot of people thinking it might even be Jeff Cobb, even though he's in the midst of a tour right now in New Japan. A lot of people say, oh, it's going to be Jeff Cobb. There were a lot of things being thrown around. Oh, well, it's Trent Beretta returning. Lots of speculation going around, some interesting thoughts, but it ended up being Mark Davis. Now, I'm a Mark Davis fan. I like Mark Davis, while it is true that when he was clearly in Aussie Open with Kyle Fletcher, it was very clear that Fletcher was the future star, but Mark Davis, just a tremendous wrestler and a great bruiser, right? A guy that I've always liked because he really leaned into the I'm a big dude and I'm designed to just mow people down. And I always enjoyed that. I've always been a fan of Mark Davis. Now, that being said, this situation that we're in here makes absolutely no sense. Despite the fact that Don Callis went on commentary and took the time to explain to us the reasoning as to why, right? It still doesn't make sense. The reasoning he used was to say, I brought in Aussie Open and because of this, I own Mark Davis's contract or whatever, and I can have him do whatever I want. That's essentially what it was, right? So he's basically saying he's my property and I can ask him to do whatever I want. Well, where was this in 2024, just a few months ago, when Mark Davis was outright fighting with members of the Don Callis family, when he was trying to get Kyle Fletcher to reconsider what he did to Will Ospreay? Where was this? At that time, he was a part of the Don Callis family, according to Don Callis's updated lore. He would have been a part of the Don Callis family, but Callis decided to not enforce his contract, even though Callis was going around trying to keep Fletcher from doing what he's doing. And it doesn't make sense. And they had multiple matches over a couple of months where Davis was involved. He was involved. He was an ancillary character to the Kyle Fletcher turn. How does any of this make sense? I have the impression, it's just a gut feeling, okay? I had the impression they had someone else lined up. I really do have the impression that AEW had someone else lined up, and that person bailed, couldn't make it, etc., whatever. There's something happened. It fell through, and they had to go with a plan B. And this is the best they could come up with. That is objective nonsense. Makes no sense. You cannot connect this in anything that doesn't break your head or starts creating head canon, right? Where you're like, oh, well, maybe this and when you think about it that way, it makes sense. No, then you're making stuff up. Then you're just creating head canon for yourself. Look, between us all, it stunk. Okay? Bad. Now the match itself, really good. I thought this was a really good match. And I'm not saying that as if I'm surprised. These are boys. They know each other well. But once you got over the womp hump of Mark Davis being he really pummeled Ospreay in this match, pummeled him severely, savagely. Does a release dragon suplex, big heavy offense that he was just laying on Ospreay the entire way. Ospreay lands a pescado and then an os cutter. Davis lands a great pile driver as well. He exposes the corner turnbuckle, which for some reason, suddenly Rick Knox decides that he's a good referee, and it's he sees it and he stands right in front of the turnbuckle, between the turnbuckle and Davis, who's arguing with them. But Davis turns around and eats a hidden blade and loses. Will Ospreay gets the win. So outside of that little nugget, I thought this was a really good match. I thought 3 3/4 stars. I thought it was tremendous. More of this on my TV. I thought the wrestling overall was really good on the show, by the way. There weren't tons of matches, but what we did get was really good. After the match, Will Ospreay gets on the mic and basically to bring out Kenny Omega to some huge cheers. I mean, look, and you saw it again last night. You saw it again on this Dynamite. There's two guys in this company that the AEW crowd wants to see, wants to cheer for, wants to get behind. And it's those two dudes in the ring. It's Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega. And I think this is why a lot of people right now are extremely frustrated with the product because I think everyone sees clear as crystal that these are the guys that they want at the top of the card. I would even argue that Swerve Strickland, you see the reactions that he gets and the matches that he puts on, just like last night. These are the people that should be at the top of the card. We shouldn't be fooling around with Orange Cassidy. No disrespect, but we shouldn't be fooling around with Orange Cassidy or Adam Copeland. These are the guys that the audience wants. And a lot of these guys that the audience wants are guys who have made AEW their identity, who have been here for a while. Look, Kenny Omega's an OG. Will Ospreay, he did his integration perfectly on top of being, an incredibly hot pro wrestler and, one of the greatest to ever do it. He made sure the AEW audience understood that he was one of them, that he was on their side, and it worked perfectly. He is one of the rare stars that were hired by AEW, that was brought in and felt like the AEW vibes should feel, if that makes sense. And he made sure that he was completely integrated and that he wasn't just a guy coming in to do his thing in this company. He wanted to be a part of the company. He wanted to be part of the heart of the company, and you feel that. And I get it. Like, I can support that. I can absolutely get behind, Omega and Ospreay being in the mix as your top guys. I mean, it makes tons of sense. Anyway, so Kenny gets on the mic and, runs down Davis and puts over the match in Brisbane, and Konosuke, Takeshita, and Kyle Fletcher come out to sort of just like get upset. They have a match later on, so nothing gets physical. And basically, Omega tells them next week, get ready for a fight. And I don't know if he meant next week on Dynamite or next week at the Grand Slam show, but look, I thought this was a very good match. Good little segment to get the crowd hot. Like I said, this was a good crowd throughout the entire show, but I think AEW played in a lot of its strengths as well. We get a hype package for Ricochet versus Swerve Strickland. That is happening a little later in the evening. And also, I'm going to try and pronounce things properly. Then the Hurt Syndicate come out with their titles. It's their first in-ring appearance since winning the belts off of Private Party 2 weeks ago. They put over Private Party, saying they're great young talents, but they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, they grandstand a bit, set themselves up for any challengers, and that's where the Guns return. Austin, Colton, Gunn do their Bullet Club entrance with the Bullet Club song. It's it's still a great theme song, right? It's an absolutely tremendous theme song. So the Guns come down, they talk some trash. I would say Austin is better at it than Colton is. Colton on the mic is just, he's subpar. Just let Austin do the talking. I think that's fine. It's crazy how Austin's mannerisms remind me of his father. Like, you take a look at his mannerisms and they are 100% like him, right? So they challenge for the titles. MVP accepts, agrees. They're setting up the match for next week. Calls them the Ass Boys. Because he was in his promo, he was basically saying, "Well, look, I want to conduct some business, but you guys don't look like businessmen." Because they're in their wacky gear, and Colton has that braid, that no one takes seriously. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. Just don't do that, Colton. Don't do that. And so the idea here is that, the Guns are not on the level of the Hurt Syndicate, which is what you need to do, because it makes sense, because the Guns have never been portrayed as being on the level of anyone. Everyone sort of accepts that their title run was considered to be like a goof, right? And it's just like, oh my God, the Guns? Why the Guns kind of thing? So they're not taken seriously. MVP doesn't take them seriously, which absolutely he shouldn't. Which he should not. And I think that's fine. I think it's actually a good idea. Like, this went exactly how it should. Hurt Business is still a great act, and it's over. Crowd loves it. Yeah, good little segment. Renee Paquette is backstage. She's in front of Mercedes Monet's locker room. She wants to interview her, but Harley Cameron arrives with the Mercedes Monet puppet, and she does some puppetry and some jokes until Monet comes out of her locker room because of all the commotion, right? You know, she tears Harley down for winning her first televised match, and you know, just being a heel and saying, oh, isn't it cute you want a match at Grand Slam and you're just out here doing goofy shit, which is fair, you know. Anyway, she throws the puppet down, tears it off of Harley's hand and throws it down. Harley flips her off as she's walking back. As Mercedes is walking back into her locker room, Harley flips her off, like, and it's behind her back, which is just tremendous stuff. Yeah, I mean, look, they're doing a nice little story here for Harley, who is an Australian native, and she's going to get her match. It's going to be a nice little moment. It's not going to be anything that, you know, we're not going to add this into Mercedes's, you know, book of great matches. You know, that's not what this is going to be. That's not what this is for. Harley's going to have her nice little moment, and it's going to be fine, and everyone's going to enjoy it, and everyone's going to get a kick out of it, and then we'll all move on. Hangman Adam Page is backstage. He talks about Christopher Daniels overstepping his boundaries. You know, he's trying not to show that he felt bad for hurting Christopher Daniels to the point that he will not wrestle anymore. So he's like taking the hard line stance. Where he's like, well, you know, if he didn't want to get hurt, shouldn't have gotten into the ring with me, that kind of stuff. And then Max Caster is off camera, and, you know, he's sort of like, are we done yet? Can you guys just move on? Which pisses off Hangman. And he sort of kind of chases after him, where Max is like, okay, I'm going to go now. And Page's like, wait, let me follow you, kind of thing. You know, so it's like, you know, that would play into an upcoming segment. Then we had the team of Konosuke Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher defeating the Hounds of Hell, Brody King and Buddy Matthews. I liked this match. I thought it was very good. Great start between Fletcher and Murphy, which Matthews. Did I call him Murphy? Matthews. I know. It's Matthews. But this was a great start between the two. Buddy Murphy. Matthews starts going hard on both of them. Konosuke Takeshita at some point Germans. Brody King gets back up and hits him with a rolling elbow. Great tope con hilo by Matthews as well, followed by a Meteora back in the ring. Half and half suplex by Kyle Fletcher. Then as Murphy is going up the ropes at some point, he's going up the ropes and the Rainmaker music hits, Kazuchika Okada, right? As we established, there's there's an upcoming match, so there's tension, there's an angle here. But Okada doesn't show up. It's just the music, so that distracts Buddy Murphy enough to fail at whatever he's doing. But nonetheless, the Hounds of Hell are able to keep their momentum. They do the cannonball kick corner thing that they used to do with Malachi Black as well. Now there's just two of them now. There's a cover, which is broken up by a top rope senton dropkick combination by Konosuke Takeshita, which the camera didn't catch. That cool move wasn't caught because it's AEW's camera crew, and we only saw it because they played it on replay. Draping DDT by Kyle Fletcher and a double team brainbuster, which actually looks pretty nasty, not gonna lie, on Brody King for the win. Yeah, I thought this was very good. Like, outside of the distraction nonsense, right? This is the kind of stuff that sometimes I'm like, why do we do this? Why are we still doing this? Why are we still doing this in this era where it's like wrestlers' themes play and then they get distracted and then it throws everything off them? Like, it really threw the match off. It threw the flow of the match. I don't think it was well done. And it's kind of a weird, it's always been a weird trope, but I think it's gotten weirder and worse as years went on. And I if you want to do it as a joke, I'm fine with it. But as a real thing to have happen in a match, come on, we could do better than that. But a solid match, a real solid match. I enjoyed it a lot. 3.5 stars for me on that. Probably would have went a little higher if it wasn't for the dubious nonsense. Samoa Joe and Hook are backstage. They're doing they're back doing their old shtick when it was 3 of them with Shibata. They said Shibata was in Japan, right, or something like that. Anyway, they're walking backstage. They're talking. They're having a little banter, a little back and forth before going into the patriarchy locker room to beat up Christian Cage. Christian Cage is not there. It's Kip Sabian and Nick Wayne. So they beat up on those 2 guys. And Christian Cage, in the meanwhile, enters the locker room, sees what's going on, and he just walks away, which is tremendous. So eventually, Hook and Samoa Joe walk off, and Christian Cage, who was hiding behind a corner, then enters the locker room and goes, "Guys, what happened?" Which is tremendous. Good little segment. I'm glad they're still doing that relationship with Hook and Samoa Joe. I really like that. MJF comes to the ring. He's got his mic time set up. Calls Jeff Jarrett geriatric. He says that the lesson here is that AEW, the E in AEW stands for elite, not for elderly, and it's time to move on from this stuff. And I agree. And if this is MJF giving us some commentary on how he feels certain people are being pushed right down the company as opposed to others, well, I'm all for it. I'm completely for it. And if AEW is ready to pivot away from the Jeff Jarrett stuff, which was not working, right? Let's be honest. It was just not working. That's good. At least like there's something here that you can sink your teeth into. I wish they'd pivot away from another thing in the company. But beggars can't be choosers. During this bit of the promo, Max Caster runs into the ring and hides behind MJF. Hangman Adam Page comes out. He hits the ring. Max then hits the bricks through the audience. But we get another nose-to-nose confrontation between Hangman and Page. Page just essentially walks around MJF and goes after Caster. Meanwhile, as he's running away, MJF calls him a hack. Look, we know where this is going, all right? We know where this is going. And I still think this is going to be a refreshing turn of events. 2 guys that are so easily identifiable with AEW, that are great workers, that are going to have themselves a feud. We need more of this kind of stuff. Less of other things and more of this kind of stuff. So far, this has been good, and I'm looking forward to it. Dustin Rhodes then comes in and basically, he tells him to keep Owen Hart's name out of his mouth. He's his friend and so on and so forth. And I think at this stage, this entire company should keep Owen Hart's name out of their mouth. Not because I don't think Owen Hart should not be paid tribute to, because he absolutely should. It's just because right now I feel like instead of the memory of Owen Hart being dealt as special, now I feel it's just a device. It's a plot device. We've been using it quite a bit at this point, in ways that I feel are unnecessary and don't really add any gravitas. Like, please bring back the Owen Hart tournament. I love that. But, Jeff Jarrett's been bringing it up, and it's happened a lot more frequently over the past 8 months that we've been referencing Owen Hart not over and over, but frequently. A little more frequently than it should, when his name should be treated with reverence, right? That's just me. I'm a little annoyed by it. I'm like, why are we doing this again? Dustin could have just come in and say, I don't like how you're disrespecting my friend Jeff Jarrett. They just had a promo, last week, right? Or the week before, where it would have been really easy for Dustin to just say, you got to stop talking shit about my friend Jeff, instead of bringing in the Owen Hart thing, which feels a little tacked on and a little insincere. Just because it's like, well, we've all... Anyway, you get what I'm saying. I feel like we're not using his name in reverence anymore. It's more like a device to get angles forward. And that I'm like... That I'm not super into. So he talks down, he being Dustin talks down MJF, of course. MJF fires back. And MJF basically saying, it took you 37 years to get out of the shadow of your father, which is, something that did strike a nerve. And I'd see why. There was a time where Dustin and Dusty were estranged. So because of multiple things, right? But they did reconcile in the latter years, and in later years is what I should have said. In later years they reconciled, and Max is basically saying, it took you 37 years to get out of the shadow of your father, only to fall under the shadow of your baby brother. So I've seen a few comments about how MJF shouldn't have mentioned Cody. Mentioning Cody, or referencing him at the very least, because he didn't say his name, but referencing him at the very least, it shows that our stars are bigger in WWE or whatever. And I'm like, oh, look, here's the thing. Like I've seen some bad takes from people who used to work in the business and who seem desperate to try and carve a little niche out of themselves because no other wrestling company wants to hire them. So, their idea now is, to go into the grift to carry some water for WWE while shitting on everything AEW does. This brain rot that a lot of wrestling fans have, that Vince established that you never mention other companies, is a Vince thing. I hope, that's a Vince thing. Never talking about other wrestling companies is something that Vince established. And for a while, there was no other wrestling companies to talk about because Vince was the only game in town. So we're in another era where everything is connected and people have access to, wrestling in ways that we never had before. Maybe there was a time it would be easier to not talk about what's going on in other territories because the lines of communication or of broadcast or of transmission of what's happening in other wrestling promotions was not as easy, right? It was difficult to know, if you were in North America, what was going on in Japan, for instance, because there was no ease of distribution. Now it's the complete opposite. Still thinking that living in silos is a good idea is weird. I don't have a problem with them mentioning Cody Rhodes, or not even mentioning, again, just acknowledging, inferring Cody Rhodes. Because Cody right now is one of the biggest stars in pro wrestling right now. Yes, he works for the other guys. But what do you do then? Like, do you dig your head in the sand and do exactly what Vince did? And AEW has never been about that either. AEW's lore has always been the lore of pro wrestling. I don't necessarily have an issue with it. I don't have a problem with it, really. And is this going to have people go, you know what? MJF is right. The bigger stars are on WWE. I'm going there right now. No, if you're watching AEW right now, you're going to stick around. Like right now, you can make an argument that it is the hardcores who watch AEW right now. So, I don't have an issue with it, is essentially what I'm trying to say here. Especially, look, maybe I would have had a little more of an issue if Cody had gone back to WWE and he'd be implanted in the mid-card again, which wasn't the case. Well, which isn't the case, right? We know that. He's not mid-carding anytime soon. He's a big star. And his dig at Dustin was to say, well, yeah, you're here still doing your thing, but look at your baby brother. outshining you, outclassing you kind of thing. I really, really don't have an issue with it. Now, I hope I'm making my point clear. If MJF had said that and Cody was like mixing it up on the mid card fighting The Miz, right? And then he uses the same line saying, look, you're being outshined by your brother Cody. Then I'd adhere to that argument where it's like, well, even in the because that would mean that MJF would be saying that even on the mid card, former AEW stars are bigger stars in WWE. And that doesn't make any sense. Cody's one of the biggest names in wrestling right now. What do you want from me? It just makes sense. It's fine. I don't have an issue with it. Anyway, they end up brawling after a good exchange, a good back and forth. I think Dustin was a little, he sounded a little scattered at times, but this was all made up for with a great pull-apart brawl that they had. So if this is the pivot, if this is what they wanted to do, to have MJF be the guy who, takes out the veterans, takes out the old guys, and they've decided to pivot away from Jeff Jarrett and go to Dustin Rhodes. I mean, it's a win up and down, right? I think Dustin is an established AEW guy. I think he still has a lot in the tank as opposed to Jarrett. And a better promo, I think, overall, especially for this kind of stuff. This is absolutely a win. It's the best pivot. If you want to pivot, you pivot like this. It's a great pivot. It's the best pivot. I'm all for it. Oh, and MJF takes a little dig at Christopher Daniels, putting him into the olds group as well. So I don't hate this little angle that we're going towards. No, it's fine. I like it. Toni Storm defeated Queen Aminata. Toni Storm came out impersonating Mariah May. That's her next big performance. Look, I don't know if this match was good or not because we spent the majority of this match cutting to commentary to see Mariah May's irate face, her angry, pouting face for probably the majority of the match. Felt like the majority of the match. The amount of camera cuts from the in-ring to May was distracting, took away from the match, on top of Toni Storm doing her Mariah May shtick, which I felt also impeded the match. I've got nothing here. This structure annoyed me because here's the thing: we kept cutting back to Mariah May, but Mariah May was basically sitting like this, with her angry eyes, not moving, not contributing anything for the entire match. That's all she was doing. It's fucking nonsense. I don't understand it. It's just like complete nonsense. Took me out of the match completely. And we're hearkening back to some issues that I have with the Timeless Toni Storm gimmick, and as such that I have always said that I don't have a problem with a gimmick, even if it's a little more absurd, if it doesn't impede on the in-ring. And I think Toni trying to be Mariah May added a layer in the match that just took away from some good action. Just took away from letting these two women go ahead and wrestle. And I don't know. I really didn't care for it. And I could not stand the amount of camera cuts going towards Mariah May during this match. Super annoying. Very, very annoying. Dustin Rhodes cuts a promo backstage. And he says that next Tuesday, he's going to beat MJF because they are taping on Tuesday because everyone's leaving for Australia, probably the next day. So they're taping Tuesday. Next week's Dynamite will not be live. So I think he meant next Wednesday and Tuesday. But yeah. So we get another New York minute from the Learning Tree. Chris Jericho, saying Chris Jericho basically saying he's coming after Bandito. He's going to do he's sending Brian Keith, who was a bounty hunter, to collect the bounty on Bandito. No one should tell Chris Jericho that the bounty was actually just a gimmick. It's just like it's not real. But anyway, then Big Bill calls out Powerhouse Hobbs. Hobbs is on location, so he comes out and he's, to confront the learning tree, and he sees all three guys and is like, I don't care. I'm Powerhouse Hobbs. And he goes after the dudes. He goes after Bill, and everyone piles on top of him. The Outrunners come out to fend off Jericho and Brian Keith. And basically just leaves us to the meat of this program, which is Bill and Hobbs beating the shit out of each other, and trying to one up each other on who can slam a security guard better, which was tremendous. I loved this angle. And then it even reaches the point where they're fighting on commentary, right? They fight on the commentary table, roll all over it. Taz and everyone, is moving away. No one is speaking because everyone's lost their headphones, and they're fighting, and they fall into a cameraman who drops his camera, which seemed unintentional because the camera shot at the end was just on the floor. You could only see those guys' feet. And just as we're going to commercial, Taz goes, "Are we back?" Commercial. I loved it. Loved the chaos of it. I thought it was a tremendous angle. It's such great stuff. This Big Bill Powerhouse Hobbs stuff has been so good. It's been so good. Great TV undercard feud. I love this. We really do overthink pro wrestling. When I see stuff like this, I'm like, we overthink it. We just overthink pro wrestling, because when you boil it down to its simplest elements, if you put great talent into positions where they can use their strengths to their advantage and keep it simple, magic ensues. Magic ensues. And then that leads us to the main event, where Ricochet, defeated Swerve Strickland in another really good match. I have nothing to complain about when it comes to the wrestling on the show. Well, maybe outside of the Aminata, Toni Storm stuff, but that's the outlier in the overall analysis, right? Crowd was into it. They love Swerve. There's a lot to love in Swerve. Great move early on where Ricochet anti-airs Swerve Strickland, who was leapfrogging, and he lands a drop kick, like a perfect drop kick. And it had torque to it too, Just great stuff. Great spot as well when they're fighting on the barricade, on the top of the barricade. They're exchanging some blows, and Swerve ends up just slamming Ricochet on the barricade for a tremendous spot. They're in the ring. There's this great exchange, reversals that ends with a big slam by Swerve Strickland. He lands the house call, a swerve stomp, cover. Ricochet kicks out. Ricochet German Swerve on the apron. Back in the ring, does a springboard 450 and a shooting star press. Goes for the spirit gun, which is interrupted by a house call. Swerve goes up for the swerve stomp, lands it, but Ricochet's feet accidentally low blow Swerve Strickland, which allows Ricochet to land the spirit gun and get the win. In nefarious ways, but nonetheless, I thought this was really good, and this feud must continue. I think this was a much needed win for Ricochet. I love his heel work. I think it's been great. Comes across as a try-hard geek. It's fantastic. Interesting that the scissors didn't come into play. I'm not against it, because clearly if this feud is moving forward, it's bound to get a little rougher. I'm sure these scissors will have another use down the line. Revolution's coming up. This could end up being a marquee match. I think this feud has been very good. I think it's been very well done. And this little story beat that they have here just adds another layer for Swerve to get his win back, obviously, but also give us a bigger, better match, probably at Revolution, which, look, I'm excited for now. I'm excited for it. And I think Ricochet has done the perfect move so far, which is to have pivoted away from the aw shucks smiley babyface thing that he has always done in WWE, and now is trying out something else, and you can tell he enjoys it. You can tell he feels good about it. It's a good fit for him, and it's working out. So why not continue down that road? I like it. And I thought this was a good show. I thought this was a really, really good Dynamite. The in-ring, for the most part, was solid, even though not a lot of matches. The matches that we did get, super solid. Stuff happening. The advancement of the angles made sense. You could see some pivoting happening away from stuff that wasn't really working. This is probably one of the better Dynamites that we've gotten in a while. I mean, Collision has been consistently good. Collision has really been consistently good. So, you know, we're a little more on that level as opposed to just a good Dynamite. No, this was a pretty good episode. This was a good episode. I enjoyed it tremendously. And I hope you enjoyed this review, which we are going to wrap up right now. Thank you again, everyone, for joining me. Subscribe to the channel if you would like to have more about more nonsense that I do, such as tonight on Thursdays. I usually stream, so if you're listening to this on Thursday, join us on youtube.com/MrWarrenHayes. I don't know why my voice is going out. Is it still leftovers from the cold? I don't know. But I'm going to go rest it now. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Go watch some Randy Orton and get back to me. And I'll see you next time.